a not-for-profit organization that strives to impact the lives of their clients and the community they serve by engaging, restoring, and empowering individuals to reach their fullest potential by offering a broad range of mental health, victim services, and substance abuse disorder services throughout Polk Highlands and Hardee counties. Their story on crisis prevention is coming up on Polk Place. Welcome to Polk Place. I'm your host, Lauren Lingell. Joining me in studio, we have Kirk Fasshauer, who is the Director of Crisis Services at Peace River Center. Kirk, welcome. It's so great to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me, Lauren.
I'm really excited to talk about the crisis response team and kind of any offshoot that they may be involved in and that you're working with. So tell me how Peace River Center came to have a crisis response team, and even before that, what is a crisis response team?
Well, the crisis response team has 5 functions the way Peace River Center has it set up. It got its start in 2002. Some of the funding for that program came with the closing of G. Pierce Wood, which was a state hospital not too far from here in Arcadia. So the crisis response team is set up to handle a 24-hour crisis line. That's 519-3744. That's a line that anybody can call in any type of emotional distress and speak to a person. Again, it's 24/7. 519-3744 is all anybody needs to call and talk about whatever is going on for them at that moment. And that can lead to direction for a whole variety of different services. Then we have it set up in Bartow and our Lakeland CSU where there's walk-in services as well. Again, that's also 24/7. So if at 2 in the morning they don't want to necessarily just talk to somebody on the phone, they can actually come and speak to somebody in person. And again, about any emotional issue that may be going on.
So at your Lakeland campus and your Bartow campus,
correct,
you have walk-in service and you also have your 2 crisis lines like housed there.
Well, the crisis line is just one
okay.
line, and it can be answered at either location.
Okay,
the
great.
person on the other end of the phone doesn't know where that person may be answering from, whether it be Lakeland or Bartow.
Okay, fantastic. So, what types of things might be going on? Just an example that somebody might call.
Could be that they've got some test anxiety, so we may get some calls from some of the adolescents who are going through FCATs or what have you, and wanting to talk about the stress that they may be having. Could be somebody breaking up with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, calling because they're sad about that. Or just saying overall anxiety they're feeling. They lost a job recently, to some more serious kinds of things where it's somebody's contemplating suicide or maybe having a psychotic episode where they believe people are chasing after them, and so they get on the phone. Suicide prevention is one of the bigger calls we tend to get, where somebody may be calling us to talk about their thoughts of suicide and wanting to hurt themselves, and the counselors are able to guide them through a process to figure out some other alternatives that may be helpful for them.
So from the outside looking in, somebody says, okay, you've got this individual on the phone that says, I think I'm going to kill myself, and you've got your crisis counselor there. I think it'd be very difficult outside looking in for somebody to say, how does this work? Like how does,
right.
So what are some of the things that that crisis counselor might set in motion or help the individual do?
Well, it sometimes depends on the level, because there's could be various levels. If somebody's contemplating suicide and says, well, what's going on? What's happened? We talk about the stressors in the person's lives. how long have they been having these thoughts or these feelings, and really start to look at some things that they may have a value in their life that we want to empower and build on those things, so that the person doesn't feel so isolated, so alone. That's really the big part of it, is that the person isn't alone. They're not isolated. There are people out here who are genuinely concerned about their well-being and want to help them. So they can call on the crisis line, and often if the counselor feels, well, maybe a face-to-face would be beneficial, and that's one of the great things about CRT, is that they are able to then go to that location. So the crisis doesn't necessarily have to come to us. We can go out to that location. It may be the person's home. It may be law enforcement may call us out to help with the situation as well. So we can go to them, and they can actually sit face-to-face with somebody, because often you lose some things in just a phone conversation.
Does that typically make some of the clients uncomfortable, or would I be surprised at how many actually take advantage of that and have a crisis counselor come on out?
It is a mixed package, because often who comes out to the house? Law enforcement who are going to take you away, right? DCF comes out and they provide some services, and it's often people have this stigma that it's not good to have somebody come out to the house. In this case, we're coming out, we're going to do a crisis assessment. The intent is to avoid having somebody go through inpatient hospitalization if possible. But if it's not possible, we really try to encourage and work with the individual to come on their own, to come in voluntarily, because it's a little more dignified if they're able to recognize, I need some additional help beyond what I can get here, and I don't feel safe enough to do it on my own. I need to be someplace safe. Worst case scenario is we are calling law enforcement out to come assist us, and we're have that person driven off to a nearest receiving facility.
So your crisis counselors are not able to issue a Baker Act or put someone under a Baker Act?
Not all of them. The intent with the crisis response team is to avoid inpatient hospitalization where it's not necessary or it would be inappropriate. The reason there is I want them to work a crisis plan with somebody, and often somebody who has the ability, a licensed individual has the ability to initiate the Baker Act. It's much easier to pull out the certificate, write up what's necessary to get that done. It's a little bit more work for somebody to sit there and kind of come up with an alternative plan for that. And even in the community, if a professional licensed individual were able to initiate that Baker Act, law enforcement gets called anyways because they have to transport to the nearest facility.
And can you give just a brief definition of Baker Act, just in case some of our viewers aren't familiar?
Sure. The Baker Act is Florida's mental health act, where an individual who's in extreme need and is in immediate danger, typically up to themselves or others, and has some mental health issues, mental illness related issues, they can be taken into custody by law enforcement, or have a certificate initiated by a licensed professional, or the family members can go to the courts and do what's referred to as an ex parte, where they testify that this person is such at risk that they're going to hurt themselves, hurt somebody else. They're really not oriented to reality, and because of that lack of orientation, it could become dangerous, or they could hurt themselves. So they are brought into a facility, a receiving facility, and it's often the nearest facility from where they're picked up.
And just to clarify, tell me if I'm correct on this, the people that may call the crisis stabilization unit or may stop by to speak to someone are not necessarily in a situation where it's a worst case scenario, where it is something like they're facing suicide. It is some of those less severe things that you mentioned.
Correct. We're trying to do some preventative work as well. Often when folks get to the point where they're making that decision about suicide, that's a deep end kind of crisis. What we want to try to do is prevent some of that. So if you've got anxiety building and you just need somebody to be that release valve so that you can talk a little bit about these issues so it doesn't build up over time, that's what the crisis response team can do. They can be that non-biased ear listening to your situation and come up with some alternatives. Because in the crisis response team, they're for a crisis situation. It's got to be in that moment. And if there's something further that is required, additional services, we can refer to Peace River Center, Winter Haven, Lakeland, wherever that person's insurance covers, because we don't want to send them into financial crisis. So we evaluate their financial situation as well and direct them appropriately to wherever the service is.
The accessing or navigating the mental health resources in the county and the community can be quite a challenge, especially if you're not feeling your best. So the crisis response team is able to assist with that.
Absolutely. You're correct. It is a daunting task, especially if you've never been exposed to the service system that's in place. Often people don't understand what resources are out there. Not that we have a ton of resources, but there are resources out there for people to get help and to talk about their issues. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad person, doesn't mean that they're going to be locked up and the key's going to be thrown away. It doesn't mean that they're going to be shunned or looked at differently. There's that mystique and the stigma around mental illness that often prevents people from dealing with some day-to-day mental health issues. And in the day-to-day mental health kinds of issues are relationship issues. There's stressors in our lives, whether it be through work, whether it be through relationships, whether it be through families. Those are the types of things outpatient services can provide. Peace River Center has a couple of offices where outpatient is offered up in Lakeland. We are down in Wauchula, and we have some offices in Sebring as well.
So we're running out of time, but before we move on, tell me what you think one of the best things to come out of the crisis response team has been.
I think one of the best things that the crisis response team has provided this community is another level of service to educate and support law enforcement in their efforts to try to help people in these types of crises. Because for law enforcement, they're able to, they're the ones that are going to get called. 911 is going to get called, and they're going to send out somebody in law enforcement. They've had some training in mental health, but not a lot of training. They've got an additional support piece to call to support them and help them kind of assess the situation and get people connected to the appropriate care, rather than it building to a point where the individual is unfortunately incarcerated.
Or killed in some cases.
Or killed in some cases, correct.
That is a wonderful byproduct of the crisis response team, and very valuable in this community.
Thank you.
So, one more time, tell our viewers how they can access the crisis line and go to find more information.
Sure. They can call 519-3744. Again, 519-3744. That's the 24-hour crisis line. They can call there. They can even ask for information. They don't necessarily need to be in crisis. They can call that number to get some information and referral information. So if you need to know what are outpatient hours or how do I get a hold of the Peace River Center offices in Lakeland, here's a number or an appointment line to call. They can do that through there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here, Kirk. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Formed in 2002, the Crisis Response Team, also known as CRT, is a free 24-hour service that provides immediate crisis assessment and intervention and covers Polk and Hardy counties. The CRT handles information referral calls to more serious calls, such as someone who is suicidal. The team members talk through issues, identifying what the presenting problem is, coping skills previously used, and what about the current situation is different. Peace River Center doesn't wait for the crisis to come to them. The CRT can go to the person in distress, no matter where they are or what time of day it is. For more information, you can give them a call at 863-519-3744, or you can look them up on the web at peacerivercenter.org.